End of the line, boys and girls.
Hello and welcome to another bad movie review. This time we are looking at Sleepy Hollow High. This film is from 2000 and runs about an hour and 21 minutes. It's not rated. It was directed by Chris Arth and Kevin Summerfield, written by Kevin Summerfield, and it also has Kevin Summerfield as one of the actors, which makes this a vanity project. The movie stars Meagan, Adele, Lopez as Shannon, Wendy Donigian as Diana Palmer, Antonio Benedict as our bad guy monster, Ruben Brown as Z, Matt Evers as Jay, Maria Cooper Janis as Bobby, Kevin Summerfield plays Mr. E, who is their teacher, and probably one of the most successful actors in the film is George Stover, who plays another teacher. Now he's been in Attack of the 60-Foot Centerfolds, Harvesters, President's Day, Zombinatrix, Camp Blood 666 Part 2, Exorcism of the Clown, and many other low-budget films, so good on him for building a career. Wendy Donigian was in VHS 2, and a handful of other low-budget films, and Megan Adele Lopez also has a short history. So the movie opens with a jogger out on a run, obviously, and things go horribly wrong for her. Then we get to our main cast, and it starts off with a stranded motorist who I thought was like 35, but apparently he's in high school, named Justin, and he had snitched on a guy named Z. Now Z is like the local drug dealer, and he's with his girlfriend, Bobby, who I thought was Barbie for about half the movie, and then I figured out they're saying Bobby, whatever. And Z strings this guy up and torments him, and while his girlfriend writes the word snitch on his chest in what appears to be Hershey syrup. There's a couple of good lines in that section of the movie that probably can't be repeated on YouTube or other streaming platforms. But Z talks a little bit about the legend of Sleepy Hollow, and then we kind of move on to Z and four other students, including his girlfriend, this girl Shannon, Diana, and a guy named Jay. And they're sitting around getting lectured by their principal, Mr. Allen. He makes them an offer. Either they get expelled or they do community service for the rest of the year, 2 days a week. So they end up taking community service, and we get a couple of memorable lines there too. And that's one of the things this movie has, is a couple of quotable lines throughout the film that, if taken out of context, are pretty fun, but don't really do the movie itself justice. Well, the kids go out to the woods with a teacher named Mr. E, who's going to supervise them cleaning the woods, because Halloween is always the time of year where people litter the most, and it's Halloween night, or day technically, and then things go horribly wrong. A horseman shows up with a pumpkin head mask, and the mask itself looks pretty good. So I don't know if that was something they bought in the store or something they had fabricated, but the mask actually looks pretty cool. So the character credited as Pumpkin Man begins to hunt people in the woods. One of the kids finds the fanny pack of the jogger from the beginning of the movie, and she quickly rifles through it and pulls the money out and pockets it right before finding the jogger's dead body. Well, things go horribly wrong for her from that point on. Then we get a couple of lesbian jokes, one of which was actually pretty funny, but can't be repeated without getting in trouble on here. And then we learn that Bobby has a secret she's been keeping from Z, and she tries to tell him a couple times, and by the time she actually tells him, Pumpkin Man shows up and things are about to go horribly wrong. Z gets back to the cars, only to find out that they've been disabled somehow, and he does have a gun, but that doesn't seem to help him out too much. There is a pretty good fight scene between Mr. E and Pumpkin Man that goes pretty well. One of the later fights also is pretty good, but that scene is a little too dark. Now, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot to this movie that I can really tell you without ruining the entire film. There are 6 kills and no plot. I was really hoping one of the pretty blonde girls would do us all the B-movie favor, but no. This movie suffers from a lot of problems. I think the rating it gets on IMDb is pretty unfair. It gets rated really low, but this is not a traditional horror film. It's more of a character study, like a very special episode of Degrassi High. From what I could tell, the movie was made for about $16,500, and it is filmed in mono, so that really does limit it. It was filmed in Maryland, even though it's supposed to take place in New York, and you get glimpses of license plates every now and then, so it kind of breaks that illusion. But because this is more of a character piece than a horror film, I think a lot of people misunderstand what they're trying to do here. I think this was one of those production reels deals where people are trying to showcase their skills to advertise their talents. Like the actors were getting screen credits, the writers getting writer credit, etc. Now, Kevin Summerfield did a pretty good job on the story itself. It's a fairly well-written piece, but it definitely focuses way too much on the characters themselves. The low body count didn't bother me at all. It was the fact that there's so much character development in between the kills that until the end of the movie, there's really not much there to keep you interested. It's a bit slow going. Now, if you're watching it as a character study and not as a horror film, the pacing isn't that bad. But if you're watching it as a horror film, the pacing's kind of terrible because the kills don't happen frequently enough and there's too much interpersonal communication for it to be too exciting. Plus, it's pretty obvious that they filmed it with over-the-counter consumer electronics. There's no high-end technology here, so that probably constrained the budget quite a bit, and it looks like early digital. Since this was around 2000, I have a sneaky suspicion that their budget was too restrictive for a lot of things, including a professional tripod. There are some really good shots in here where the cinematography is actually really good, but there's a lot more where it's not, where you can tell somebody's just holding the camera because it has a little bit of a shake to it. And if it's not from somebody just holding the camera, then they definitely had a low-end tripod. So it's a real mixed bag on that front. I'd have a hard time really recommending this one, but I didn't hate the film. It was just a little slow going at times, and it really seemed more like a after-school special or a TV movie. But I think the ratings that it does get are a bit unfair because it is pretty well written. There's some interesting ideas here, and I'd like to see this movie either get a sequel or get remade. The downside is they did one of the most obnoxious things you could do in a movie, and that's the last couple minutes where they have the big shocking twist. And it's the most tiresome cinema cliche in horror film history. And that really annoyed me. But again, still didn't make this movie the worst thing I've ever seen. Is it a great movie? No. Is it a good movie? Not really. But I thought the actors were doing their best, and they were pretty stock standard B-movie actors. I didn't really have a problem with any of that. You could have seen any of these people in a Hallmark movie or a sci-fi made-for-TV movie or just other low-budget B-movies. In fact, some of them actually have potential, but it doesn't look like too many of these guys really made a career out of this. So I'm not going to recommend this, but if you come across it and you're into character study pieces, it might be worth a look. And if you're looking to make your own movies, there's a lot of lessons you could learn from this film on what not to do and some things that are done well. Most of the kills are off screen, and I think that worked really well in here. And yes, Pumpkin Man was walking around with one of those swords that you could buy off of the 2 a.m. knife show on QVC, but they were making good use of what they had around them. And I think that keeps the budget tight. And if you have a no-budget movie like this, where you've got a couple $1,000s to invest, you want to use everything you can around you to your best advantage. And using the woods, and in this case, a lot of recycled school footage, I think you can pull it off on a very tiny budget. And for what this is, for the budget, they did a pretty good job. But again, not a horror film, it's a character study piece. Another thing is that they did what the Blair Witch Project did and made a fake documentary about the movie, and they called it Curse of Sleepy Hollow, but then they used the Sleepy Hollow High logo in it, and just a bunch of clips from the movie with a few scenes of somebody narrating. And it says it's half an hour, but it's only 21 minutes. That was an interesting idea, but it wasn't executed very well. So it's a nice DVD bonus, along with outtakes and the trailer. Not as good as it could have been if they'd actually driven to what at the time was called North Tarrytown and now called Sleepy Hollow in New York and filmed it there and made it a bit more like an actual documentary and less like an obvious advertisement for the movie that they're making. So if you're gonna get this, get it on DVD, don't watch it on streaming so you can get all the bonuses. But again, this is not something I'd recommend seeking out, but if you come across a copy, I would say pick it up and check it out just to see how they did their movie, and maybe you can learn some lessons from that. Again, not the worst thing I've ever seen, but far from the best. Didn't hate it, didn't love it. That's gonna do it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description to various support methods, and as always, we hope to see you on the next one.